OMG, baby, tell him.
Hey there, welcome to One Take, powered by backers. I am here. It is another day, as we say, another dollar. I'm joined here by Josh Adler. Josh, thank you very much for joining me on the show.
Of course, total pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Awesome. So, grand piano in the background, want to point that out to everyone. That is not a green screen. So, beautiful background. We had Josh adjust his seating to get the grand piano. So he wants to. There we go. Let me get a quick little intro here, Josh. We'll do a quick bio. So Josh is an innovator and visionary who is leading his company with a future-oriented mindset. With his extensive business and technical background, Josh attended the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, otherwise known as MIT, and Canada's top business school, the Rotman School of Management. Did you do your MBA at Rotman?
I didn't do my MBA, but I did study there. So it was a very great experience, studying for my BBA, of course, but it's with school, I believe it's very important to go to school, but at the same time, there's some things that you can't fundamentally learn in school, if that makes sense.
Makes complete sense. There's a lot of, I think school is great from a perspective of showing that you can learn, obviously to potential employers,
of course.
And sort of broadening some of your horizons, but there's nothing like real world experience and kind of the, getting out there and cutting your teeth, as they say. So why don't you tell us, I liked the comment you just made off air, the comment of made up words or words with X in them perform statistically better than real words. I'd love to hear, I'm going to start off with that. We'll get into it. Tell me what we're talking about and what you mean by that. So introduce your company name, obviously.
For sure, of course. So my company, I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Convertx. Convertx is more or less redefining the whole way that people really found tech startups, in a sense. Not only tech startups, but mobile-centric platforms, or SaaS, as they call it, software as a service-based platforms. It's fundamentally, in the past, the belief was that you go to a software developer and they build the product itself, but people have never really recognized that you're building a business. You're not building software. And fundamentally, you should be going to a business consultancy that has a software background rather than a software developer itself, because they can give you the understanding and the backing that you really need to fundamentally get that company off the ground, rather than just get software that you assume is fitting for a market off the ground. And really providing the understanding and the fitting to make sure that that product that you're going to launch will succeed within that market, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. So it's sort of the, obviously product market fit, understanding, validating the product, understanding the business or the business case for that product, the problem that it, maybe that exists, that it's solving, making sure that there's a, enough need for that problem to be solved to make it scalable. A lot of those things, go well over, the code of an app, is one thing. It's actually executing on that and getting that app to market is another thing, right? So that's definitely, so marrying the two. We obviously work with a lot of entrepreneurs here with Backers, our platform, in getting them through that whole kind of holistic approach towards launching their business. So tell us a little bit about Convertx. Obviously, it's spelled CONVERTX, right? Yeah. No E's, right? No E's in there. That's the idea, right?
It's a little bit unique, and it's if you look at it from a very dynamic perspective, if you look at companies, and I'm a huge believer in the founder, Sarah Blakely. I don't know if you've heard of her before. She's the founder, and till today, she's a very large shareholder in the company called Spanx. And it's a little off topic.
Yes.
But, she's a very innovative individual, because although many people said that she'd faced very severe challenges getting into that industry with already existing kind of competitors,
right?
What she found is, by creating a name like Spanx, it doesn't mean anything. She created the definition for it, but you have those two X's in there that not just make that or not just make that name unique, but make it one of a kind. And it's not a real word of any sort. In the same way, Convertx isn't a real word. But in the same way you have SpaceX and you have all these other kind of very innovative companies like PayPal, it doesn't really mean anything, but in a sense, you give the definition to it. And fundamentally at Convertx, what we wanted to do is with the name converting, and that sort of means taking an idea and then X for the multiplier factor. So really showing that growth and really propelling them from the initial idea standpoint, or what we call the idea crafting standpoint, following the blueprinting and then getting all their legal stuff in order or regimented more or less, and then really scaling them with a really solid kind of pre-adoption strategy, and then developing the software and launching it. Really to take them from the initial point in which where they're at the idea all the way to where they are at the end of the day, really launching that product into market.
Interesting. I love the concept of the business. I'm going to go the opposite route. So, and this is going to be an awesome sort of conversation to have between, I think, potentially two differing perspectives. So
For sure.
in what you just said. So for example, I named our company, so I'm the founder and CEO of Backers. It's spelt, so it's a English word, Backers, and our website backers.ca. I went that route, not completely against, and I love, like, I want to hear, because I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are probably watching this right now, that will be watching, that are in that debate of which way to go, right? I mean, I think it's kind of cool that we've both got, that we've gone the opposite directions, right? So I think it'd be interesting. I want to hear, I mean, I'll give you my perspective on it, and sort of my thought process was that, I'm a firm believer in, and so, from the research I did, that if it's easy for somebody to spell or easy for them to say, or it's, one word, like a simple sort of, like Convertx is very simple, like something that's super long, like, the shoe company of Idaho, blah, like no one was ever gonna remember that, right? Like it might be very descriptive and it might be great from an SEO perspective potentially, but it's not a great brand, right? So I'm a firm believer in the concept of brand, and that's the first thing, often the only thing that a company will remember you by, right? And it's sort of that branding, and then obviously the experience and the emotions and the kind of what that brand sort of evokes, right? Like, I mean, a brand is no good if it doesn't evoke emotion, right? Like, I mean, you look at, of course, the best brands in the world, I mean, they're not just a name, it really evokes kind of like maybe something about yourself, or an emotion, or a feeling, or who you want to be, an aspiration or inspiration, right? You look at like Nike. I use Nike as probably, or Apple, kind of, everyone uses those two. But Nike, it's all about, hey, I want to be an athlete. I want to present myself as an athlete, even if I'm a couch potato like I am. I'm still gonna go out and buy, a $100 pair of Nikes because what, my wife's yelling out, they're not $100, a little bit more, but anyways,
of course,
it just to kind of, it's sort of like that feeling, right? It's a feeling of like who you kind of want to be, maybe, right? Or who you were, if it, maybe you were an athlete. So that connotation, Nike is a made up word, but it's not so made up, in that it was a god. There was, there's sort of like some historical, reasoning behind it. So for Backers, it's in our case, I mean, pretty self-explanatory, somebody that backs a business, right, is the backer, and it's the plural, right? So that was the way we went. I'm interested to understand how you see the brand of Convertx with what you said with Spanx, like, for example, SpaceX or Spanx, like what is, because I really want to know, like, the other side of the conversation on something where, I look at companies where they kind of meld two words, right? Or they like cross them over. So it's not even just two separate words. It's like the first part, and the last part of two different words kind of put together. What are your thoughts? Like, what is some of the research that kind of you've gotten that gives you lends credence to sort of the Convertx mindset, if you will?
Of course, that's a really great question, and I appreciate you giving me the background even on Nike.
I want to know. I want to know. Yeah, what's that?
Sure. No,
Yeah.
it's a very kind of unique question, because if you look at companies like Nike and you look at companies like Saks Fifth Avenue and all these huge companies that use real words, some that are longer than others, and
Right.
I guess sort of the advantage that I have is being that I've worked in several of our family investments and in our family office as well. I worked at one point for a company called Domain Vault, which was later called Domainio. And basically what we did is I sat in that office nonstop all day, doing everything from sales, so picking up the phone calls, of answering calls of more or less people like Lego calling up and saying, hey, we saw one of your names, we'd like to buy it, or things along those kind of lines. And it was always crazy to see that all the different types of names that people buy when they start up companies, and all the shells that they create and the logos they create around them. And I remember still till today, there was this one name called Boozle. Didn't mean anything. Right. It's spelled, I think, VUSOL. But to me, I thought of it as an unbelievable kind of oil company name, right? Something along those kind of lines, like Boozle, like fuel, and it's very challenging coming up with the name, as you mentioned. Something like Nike is very abstract, whereas the other names I've mentioned are maybe a little bit more standard or common. But it's when I came to the grounds of Convertx, it's if you look at companies like SpaceX and you look at companies like PayPal and companies where, yes, they use some real words, but they also make up some stuff. It makes people perceive you as someone that thinks outside of the box, right? You're not used to the status quo. You're not used to being the standard. And not to offend you in any kind of way with Backers, it's an unbelievable domain name, backers.ca. You probably spent a truckload on that one, but
no, we actually got it. Really? Not to let the cat out of the bag, but it was available.
Wow, that's impressive, right?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time finding stuff, but yeah, surprisingly, that was available. I mean, I might have paid a little bit, but nothing more than a few $100s. I don't even think I paid for it, actually. I paid just the standard fee.
Of course, right? And that's the challenge. It's working in the domain industry as long as I did. I learned the game of how domains work. And at the end of the day, the trick that they say is you want an 8-letter name and you want a .com or a .ca, depending on the region, sometimes .ai or .app, but it's on the daily. I deal with clients and I brainstorm names with them and I work with specific clients. And one thing that I found is you need a name that catches attention. Like one of our clients, Cheers, he's an alcohol delivery app. The individual working with is a Columbia student, right? An unbelievably brilliant guy, absolutely brilliant. And it's a very unique name, Cheers, for an alcohol delivery app.
That's perfect. That's I think right? That's I mean, so to me, that to me is when I'm looking at a brand name, like it's sort of the obscure, what you get it, right? It's like, obviously you're delivering alcohol. What do people do when they are drinking alcohol?
Of course.
Cheers, right? It's like, I mean, literally, that's the first thing you do. You get your beer, you get your wine, you get your whatever shot. Cheers, right? So that's the. I mean, to me, that's kind of. Oh, did I freeze there? Yeah,
I think you did a little bit. Yeah,
that's kind of the where I'm looking at like a brand name. You want to evoke sort of that like understanding right away. Maybe they have to kind of think about it a little bit, where it's like, okay, what exactly do you mean by Cheers or Backers? Like, what exactly does Backers do? I get the word. I could sort of maybe think about what you might do, but what now? Okay, then when you understand what we do, now you're like, okay, perfect. That's the word. Cheers. Okay, let's use your Cheers app to order alcohol. Like, I think that's like that, to me, that from a branding perspective, I get the like Google is probably another example of sort of the other side of the fence, where not a word, doesn't had no meaning before Google. But I also think if you look at it now, and I mean, it's easy to say this in hindsight, but Google is a very easy word to say and spell. Like if I said you Google, you're not going to say, how do you spell it? You're probably going to be like GOOGELLE. Like, there's very like few variables there, right? It sounds the way it's spelled, right? That to me, from a brand recognition, is definitely, so you've got, like you mentioned, PayPal. Both are two words like that are, obviously you pay, and your pal, your buddy, right? So it's your buddy that lets you pay, or it's, your little pay buddy, right? If you looked at it that way. I mean, from a so you got the Convertx, right?
Correct.
So no E. So is there, I don't know, let's get to, this is a stupid question. Do you have anything against, what do you have against the letter E?
So it's
just
also
kidding.
at the same time. No, of course. I get what you're saying, but
I love this discussion, by the way. I think a lot of people are going to learn a lot on both sides, because I think both answers are correct. Just like for the record, I think both answers are correct. I think it depends on you as a person and what you want for your company, and sort of, as you said, out of the box, kind of like unique, or cookie cutter generic. I went with cookie cutter generic because we want to be the category king de facto across North America. So that's kind of, that was sort of my thought process to make it, we're category kings. Tell me more about Convertx though. Tell me, what brought you to Convertx? Like, what are those two kind of things? What's the thought process on Convert and X?
Yeah, so it's almost, if you look at it as something like Y Combinator, or like I referenced before, SpaceX.
Right.
You look at Y Combinator and you say, okay, why would they call it Y Combinator, right?
I've actually I've asked that same question. What's the Y mean, right? Is it like the XY axis, or anyways? And
it's interesting to see, and it's I actually at one point I asked the CEO recently. I was on a call with him, a Zoom call, the CEO of Y Combinator, and I asked him this question, and he answered in a very unique way. And he goes, honestly, first of all, I didn't brand the company, which was a very honest answer.
Okay.
But it's Y Combinator was trying to show the Y-axis of growth, right? So if you look at a graph and you look at the Y-axis and you see the growth, that's why they said Y Combinator, because you're growing at an exponential rate almost. And
so
it was
actually not, I was not far off when I said the Y-axis. Yeah. There you go. Interesting.
Right, and it's very unique to see that that's the philosophy that they really give to Y Combinator. And it's, if you look at something like SpaceX, you say space, and then they're going far, right? So on the X-axis, if you draw a straight line and you draw a straight line from here to Mars, I mean, it wouldn't necessarily be straight, but but if you realistically look at it, that's, from my perspective, why you would call a company SpaceX, as well as the growth factor. It means multiplication, or the growth of the space industry.
Like 10x. 10,
exactly,
20x,
like Grant Cardone with 10x,
10x
and his philosophy there. It's a huge Grant Cardone and Gary Vee follower, as I'm sure most entrepreneurs are itself. But it's I remember the days where I used to sit literally in my bedroom when I was much younger and just watch Grant Cardone for hours, literally obsessively. And it's his 10x policy. I've probably read that book, I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 times. It's an unbelievable book. Really kind of changes the dynamic of either be average or be excellent or be successful. And it's one philosophy that I've sort of taken, that sort of I pulled into our name as well, is they say in life there's two things that everyone faces at some point. Two issues that you can more or less face within your lifetime. And it's first one is discipline. And with discipline, it means you have to pick up phone calls, you have to show up for meetings, and you have to say you're sorry. And it's very accurate. If you have strong discipline, that's sort of very common. The second is regret. And with regret comes bankruptcy, debt, divorce, issues in your family, all that kind of stuff. And it's in life, you get to choose between those two kind of situations. And the fundamental reason I gave Convertx that kind of X at the end of it is for the multiplication of growth and discipline of that growth. And it's crucial, being any kind of founder, that it's not only is having a unique name essential for a company where it's kind of unique in a sense, where you're like, for example, there's another company working with called Shifter, SHIFTR. There's no E in it, right? So it's missing that E once again. Not I saw you were hating on it, but
no, I was joking. I was just joking because you left 2 E's out. I was wondering, why are there 2 E's? Yeah, I guess the second E is the EX maybe, but yeah, you've left one out.
I'm just joking around, but yeah, so that's how I see it. And it's, being an entrepreneur, it's always, and I'm sure you've probably seen this yourself, you're the founder of Backers, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you always feel like you're that kind of, and I don't want to say tiger, I'd like to say more so lion, because you don't really go in herds in a sense, but you're always on your own, right? You're always kind of doing things on your own throughout the entire path. Everyone realistically thinks that it's something that's done overnight, but it's constant.
The 20-year overnight success, right? The overnight, no, it's the other way around. The overnight success that took 20 years, right? Yeah. Or whatever, 10 years, let's say,
And it's, for me, fundamentally, it's nonstop trial and error. And it's that's sort of what business is. As Einstein used to say, 99 ways it didn't work till he found the one that did.
Right.
And that's what business is at the end of the day. It's every single morning you wake up and just like other people play with their doll houses as a kid, you wake up and you play business. You put on your suit, you put on your jacket, and you get working. And it's the same kind of mentality, and fundamentally, it's the same kind of thought process. The only difference is the characteristics that you have to kind of encase and sort of take on, and sort of take that perspective and figure out, okay, how today am I going to make the world a better place and create more impact? And conversely, at Convertx, compared to most software companies, we like to be impactful. It's at a very young age, I always took on the belief that I'm here to make a massive impact, right? And if I didn't, it was a waste of air. In the same sense that, and this is sort of lingering from the original topic, but from what my father does, being running the largest green energy company currently in the world, valued at over $100 billion. It's he's fundamentally taken people in India that have never even seen power before and given them power. And in a way that he's done what he's done for people like that, I'm trying to do the same thing with over 30 million people unemployed right now in the US that are looking at alternatives, or even people that are on the brink of losing their jobs and such, saying, listen, you have sometimes these light bulb moments that are absolutely unique and brilliant ideas, but what stops people fundamentally from reaching that end destination of bringing that idea to market, or at least trying to, is they lack the advisors and they lack the assistance and the blueprint and the guidance necessary to get there. And sort of dialing back, because I'm sure you probably want to ask me another question.
No, I was going to say you literally, that is like our mission and vision at Backers. Our vision is that entrepreneurs will change the world for the better, and our mission is to support entrepreneurs. Like literally, that's our vision and mission. Everything you just said. I mean, I'll reiterate what you just said with a story that I think kind of hits that home a little bit. You're Canadian as well, fellow Canadians. So the question is, who's the greatest hockey player, ice hockey player? I had to put the term ice in. I was speaking with an American the other day. I had to make sure ice hockey. Anyways, who's the greatest? I'll ask you the question. Who's the greatest hockey player to ever live in your mind?
It's that's a hard question for me, but because of family connections as a child growing up, I believe his name was the Wall. He was a goalie. Or some people say Wayne Gretzky or things like that.
Yeah, okay. So the common answer is Gretzky, Howe, or whatever, right? Sidney Crosby. Depending on the generation. But the real answer is nobody knows, right? And this is to your point of nobody knows, because hockey, to play ice hockey, first of all, you have to live in a cold country, arguably Canada, Northern Europe, maybe the US. You have to have the means to have the equipment. You have to, obviously ice time, all those aspects, right? So truthfully, nobody knows who the greatest hockey player to ever live is, because the greatest hockey to ever live probably never played hockey.
Correct.
Right? So the same with opportunities or ideas. You talk about, people, what's the greatest business or who's the greatest entrepreneur to ever live? No one knows, because they were never given that opportunity. They never got or had the chance or the resources or the support or, the advisors or the funding or whatever it is to get them from, where they were, that idea, to where they needed to be. Maybe they didn't have the family support, or it wasn't sort of like taught in schools, or, you look at 90% of the world, they're not, education isn't exactly top of mind past about grade, 5 maybe, or 8, right? So that's kind of where I see, Backers, the space we play in. We're a equity crowdfunding portal, if you will, platform at one end, but the whole sort of support component around building up those entrepreneurs. So I think there's a lot of alignment between what we do. I think there's some conversations to be had after this sort of discussion here. But yeah, we're aligned 100% there. I'm going to go back to your other point, Gary V, Grant Cardone, definitely, I think two slightly different people. Gary V, very much a motivational speaker. Grant Cardone, obviously very motivational. My question, I guess, around that motivational side of things, what do you think, and this is maybe, I deal with this myself. I'm sure all entrepreneurs deal with it. At what point you know, and what is your advice, I guess, on this? At what point do you kind of, I think people maybe get trapped in listening to motivational speakers and not so much acting on or like executing, right, on that. So maybe from your perspective, what, like, how do you guide people to kind of go from that? I mean, it's great to have motivation, it's great to be kind of like, you know, the energy, but there does come a point where you know, the rubber has to meet the road, and you know, you have to stop sort of watching other people do it and start kind of living it and doing it yourself. Like, how do you advise people to kind of go through that process?
Of course. And it's a really great question. And thank you for that as well. But it's how I fundamentally see it is you have these people like Grant Cardone, which are more of the sales realm of things. They're motivational speakers,
Right.
but they more so focus on the side of sales. And you have Gary Vee, on the other hand, that says it's people like Grant Cardone are maybe inaccurate from his perspective, but rather focus on just starting. And he pushes more so for the start. Grant Cardone focuses more for the practice in a very kind of interesting way. If you really dial it down, and it's Gary Vee is not much of a believer in school. Grant Cardone sort of the same kind of way. And I've sort of carried somewhat of the same kind of philosophy. It is important to a point if you're trying to be something like a doctor, or if you're trying to be an engineer, you can't be building bridges and having them fall down. It's not really a choice.
Right.
But fundamentally looking at these individuals and trying to decide, okay, when do you stop listening and start executing? And the question you have to ask is, it's the same kind of thing with school. When do you stop studying and say, okay, I've gotten my bachelor's. Do you stop your bachelor's, or do you go for another PhD? Do you go for your master's and then your PhD? It's very challenging to sort of give you an honest answer and say, listen, for everyone, there's this certain point when you should stop. But rather it's once you've gained the knowledge that you sort of set out to get is probably the best place to stop. And it's something I learned with Grant Cardone, which I'd recommend if I was, I don't know, 5 or 6 years younger. I would always say, listen to him as much as you possibly can and learn how he does sales as well. As another great person is someone like Chris Voss, unbelievable, with the Black Swan Group, unbelievable when it comes to sales. And the biggest and most important thing that should have been taught in school, in my opinion, is sales. And it's from every perspective, but more so kind of digging into the fact of what you're saying. And it's I listened to them for quite some time, realistically, before I actually started executing on any of it. And it's one thing I learned is I should have just started sooner. Weirdly enough,
that is the like get started, right? I mean, we talk about it here at Backers, like that it's, you know, yes, there's always later, but I mean, do it now, right? It's, you know, it's as good a time as any, right? It's never going to be, the timing is never going to be perfect, right? So it's interesting. So, sorry, who was the other guy you said from the sales? You mentioned
it was Chris Voss.
Chris Voss. Okay, I'm not familiar with him.
He's an unbelievable guy. If you look him up, he has a masterclass episodes on him, actually.
Okay.
But what his specialty was, he was a hostage negotiator, I believe.
Okay.
And he learned how to talk to people from that. And the way in which he learned how to talk to people is very kind of, I'd like to say, unique in the sense of how he plays with tones and how he talks to people from an overall perspective, and sort of guides the conversation to try to understand the value or the need that the individual is really wanting or is asking for without them actually saying it, if that makes sense.
No, I mean, I come from a sales background, sales, business development. So I've definitely done sales training. I'll be honest, I haven't watched a lot of Grant Cardone's. I've seen some of his videos. Definitely, you know, inspirational. I think I will give them this. I mean, nothing against any of these people. I mean, they're obviously successful, and they've got a great message, you know, so you can pick apart what you think or don't think, agree with or disagree. I mean, no one's perfect. But
that's with any thought leader.
Everything.
Not everything they're going to say is going to be aligned with what you agree. It's everyone has their own way of doing business, and it's your job to pick out what you're comfortable with and other things that you might not be.
Exactly. And I was going to say, like with someone like Grant Cardone, I probably could just, you know, read into sort of, you know, when I was in sort of this, you know, my early career in sales, business development, it was all about, you know, understanding, like you just said, how to, you know, basically get you know, arguably a prospect, you know, to a sale, right? And so, you know, there's the sort of the pulling, the pushing, you know, there's the what do you call it, blunt force, you know, trauma way, or there's kind of the, you know, hey, let's, you know, sort of arm in arm, hand in hand, let's figure out what the solution is, and more of like the sort of consultative type of approach. And like you said, with name escapes me, but Voss, what was his first name? Sorry, I should
Chris
get that.
Voss.
Chris Voss. I should get that straight. I'm gonna look him up after this.
It's like the water bottle company with the glass bottles.
Voss.
VOSS.
Yeah,
exactly.
So I mean, there's definitely different sales approaches. So you know what? Let's shift gears a little bit. For Convertx, how are you guys going about attracting, acquiring, and arguably converting and working with, and then obviously executing on projects with clients? Like, what's sort of your process? What are some of the things that you guys use, maybe tactically, or just kind of strategies that you guys use that have worked for you?
For sure, and that's a really great question. I mean, it's
three in a row, three really great questions in a row.
You're definitely good at this, and it's I can tell why you do so many of these. But it's from my perspective, it's when you sort of start off with any kind of sales process, I guess initially, and I want to touch on that first before I get into the onboarding process side of things. It's you really need to fine tune it. It's almost like I forget what it was called, but it was the machine that they used to decode messages in World War II.
Okay. For the
wasn't
Morse code kind of thing, or
correct kind of thing in a sense. Yeah. It's the Germans used this kind of machine, but it's fundamentally, it's how I look at it is building any kind of sales process. It's like building a perfectly oiled machine in a sense, right? Like a watch that works perfectly. If one little part of it doesn't work, the entire sales process falls apart. And that's sort of how I look at it. And you need very rigorous training with your team and your guys. And something that we found that worked very, very well is tons of kind of very highly targeted landing pages that we market to different kind of demographics, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's Facebook ads, whether it's Google ads. Every single pipeline that we have is uniquely different from the last. And that's absolutely crucial when you're trying to market a business. Most people say, okay, well, the kind of people that want to be entrepreneurs are all the same. No, not at all. Right. You have the health entrepreneurs that want to help people in a different way than the tech entrepreneurs that want to launch a new car community app. They're two very different people. Fundamentally, they both want to be entrepreneurs and both want to start empires and build and scale something. But fundamentally, their goals and their ambition and the way they look at the project is fundamentally different entirely. So it's realistically, when you initially start off any kind of business, you need to think about when you were in their shoes, what were you looking for? And that's sort of what I really dialed down, being that I founded several companies before this. I really thought about what was I struggling with when I wanted to launch my first app. Even though I'm a developer myself, what did I struggle with? And the biggest thing that I struggled with, and this is where the Convertx model sort of came to be, as well as with the assistance of our advisors, but it's the issue that you have when you start a business is three things. One, you have no clue how to get the legal side in order. Getting a lawyer on board and an accountant and getting your company registered and making sure you're doing things by the book. If you've never gone to business school or you've never registered a business before, that's really, really hard to do. Like really, really, really hard to do. The second part to that is and this is a Michael Jordan quote. I'm a huge basketball fan. I see a Raptors hat in the background there, but
lots of sports fan for sure.
Right. But it's one thing that he always said is he says, if you don't set goals in life, you can never score.
Well, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. I think that's a Gretzky or Jordan. One of them said that. Yeah.
Correct.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's my fundamental belief at the end today is that you have to set your goals. And that's where the business planning, or we call it blueprinting more or less, which blueprint for us involves a product requirements description, a pitch deck mixed with the business plan. It's sort of all those encapsulated together to bring something forth that allows you to build a game plan. Almost like a game when you're playing sports or playing basketball. Before you go make a move on anything in life, you always plan, or at least I would hope you would. And the biggest issue that I saw when I was first starting a software company ages ago was that you don't think about the plan. You don't think about, okay, how financially feasible is this? what are the chances of success? How big is the market? Doing feasibility studies. You don't even think about that kind of stuff. And it's funny to think, but if you were to invest, and I'll ask you this question for curiosity, if you were to invest $40,000 into a stock, would you do it blindly or would you do your research?
So it's an interesting question. I think you flipped the script a little bit, but so with backers, and I'll answer this question because this is why we created backers, just for that actual. And I do want to add one thing, and your buddy recommended it's a great stock as well.
Would you invest $40,000 blindly or $30,000 blindly?
So the answer is, and the answer is, it depends on what $40,000 represents to me. So I'll use that as a caveat. That, I mean, if $40,000 is all I have to invest, probably not. If $40,000 represents, a percent of a percent, a fraction of a percent of what, my overall portfolio, yeah, sure, why not, right? I mean, we're talking about two different types of individuals. What we did with backers, and I'll just throw this out at you because, everyone watching, a lot of people don't necessarily know what we did or what we do. We've created sort of a platform that allows or enables private companies to sell stock to retail investors. So the concept, though, of a backer versus an investor is sort of where we differentiate the two types of people that you want supporting your business and buying stock, right? So to answer your question, somebody that comes to the backers platform that is a follower of a company, let's say, has bought their product, uses their service, whatever, and now they're raising $1 million on the platform. They're selling, 1 million shares, $1 a share. I can put $100 in. Okay, that investment. The reason now $100 from an everyday investor, that $100 is, there's a higher percentage of it being an emotional purchase versus just, as you would have stated before, much more of a doing the due diligence, more of a financial kind of, I'm going to look at it from, every angle. I'm going to look at their financials. I'm going to look at their leadership. I'm going to look at the market. I'm going to do a complete due diligence because I'm putting in $40,000. And arguably, if that represented, even 10% of your, let's say, portfolio, right? So, or a percent, you're going to do that due diligence. Whereas with the platform we've created, it becomes more of an emotional, you're now a backer. There's a financial aspect to it. You want to make, see returns, but you also feel the fact that you're supporting maybe an idea or a vision or a business that you want to see succeed, right? So it's more than just that straight up, 40,000. I'm gonna, they're gonna 10x. Grant Cardone 10x in 3 years, and I see them in this industry, and I know there's these 3 companies, and they've got this. Their leaderships, had 3 strong exits, and right? Like checkbox, checkbox, checkbox. They've got revenue, they've got this. So yes, I'll give them 40 grand, right? So that's, I just think that it's an interesting question that you ask, because I think there is an opportunity. Maybe this is something sort of food for thought for your end. There's an opportunity to have investments that aren't purely financial, right? Yep. Obviously, 40,000 to the average person is going to be a huge hit if they were to just lose it, right?
Correct.
But $1,000, or 2,500, or even 40,000 or 25,000 to a accredited investor who has a significant portfolio to invest. Right? There's a different sort of mindset there. And that's kind of one of the things that we're working on. But not to talk too much about backers. I don't actually do this show to talk about backers. I just think it's fun sometimes to bring up points that relate to what you're asking.
For sure.
I'll flip that question to you. So the answer is, it depends. To you, what would you do? What's the question? What's the answer to the question on your side?
That's a really great, I like when people flip questions specifically, at least to me, because I like to think about the questions I always ask before I ask them. But in the case with this specific question, I'd like to say that I used to invest heavily in crypto. I had a very large crypto portfolio, and I invested in everything from Ethereum to Bitcoin, all the way to several other different types of currencies. And I don't want to bore you with the list, but I'll mention the bigger ones, but like Gollum and all that kind of stuff. But or even Neo, and it's sort of what I recognized when investing in these cryptocurrencies is it's
EOS.
You have to
did you invest in EOS or Theta?
I did. Yep.
Theta.
Theta, I did, but it didn't do so well. I found with some time that passed, and it's the best one that I sort of invested in. I found that it was Ethereum, and Neo did the best.
Right.
And they actually did very, very well at a point in time. I mean, they're not doing the best right now, but Comparably, that's how crypto is.
So Theta's gone from 3 cents in March to 78 cents, I think, yesterday. So it's backed by some, and it was not to get into stock picks here on crypto, but basically it's a video sharing, kind of like a YouTube competitor, but built on blockchain. So
very cool. I don't actually think I've heard of that one. I thought you were mentioning another one, but
no, it's interesting.
There's
Theta
so many.
Network.
There's so many different ones at this point.
Right.
And there's some that are based on gold, and there's other ones that are single layer. I was reading on one today on LinkedIn that's a single layer blockchain network, and they're so kind of unique, and it's such a new technology that if you go to sleep for 5 days and not even watch the market, it's a different market. Right. And it's something I learned is if you don't have your foot to the ground, almost like an elephant does, and really watch the market and every move that happens, and it's sort of, I took that knowledge and I took it over to stocks and invested in quite a few stocks. And one of them was Art Media, and a very unique kind of company. I don't know if you ever heard of them. They're actually Toronto based. They're a hologram company that has a functional hologram type system where you can kind of teleport someone in, and they've worked with people like companies like Amazon and companies like Apple and very, very large companies. And basically you can be in Toronto and you can have a hologram of yourself all the way in Sydney, Australia, and it looks real to everyone sitting in the crowd, and no one would ever know. It's unbelievable.
So you could be like presenting on stage as a hologram. Is it actually you saying what you're saying in just
live.
A different location? Sort of like a live stream. That's pretty crazy. Art Media?
Yeah. Art Media. The trading symbol is ARHT. But it's not a big company. I've been to their office several times, and it's a very kind of unique company in the way that they do things, because they've grown very quickly. But it's you learn by doing heavy research, and this is something I learned from any investments in, whether it's my family's portfolio or even my own. That it's whether it's this company right here, Moodwater, which is one of my family's investments, all the way to several others, and we've sort of recognized that you really have to, in the same way if you run a business, you want to know everything that's going on in it. Right. In the same way with the stock, if you're going to invest, and in our case, it's a lot of the people that we work with are investing a large sum of their savings. You would want to do a lot of research. Some of them aren't accredited investors. Some of them haven't launched businesses before. For example, the founder of Shifter has 1.3 million people in his Facebook group in less than a month, and has acquired thousands upon tens of thousands of downloads, or pre-signups as we call it, for his app before it's even live. And what
does the app do, Shifter?
It's a car community app. So basically allowing for creating, we call it creating belonging within the car community in a sense. Okay. And it's a very kind of unique app that competes with many others already existing, but it's fundamentally where it's different is it's trying to create the bond and trying to bring it closer rather than using Facebook groups that were previously existing. And he's grown at a very, very fast rate, a 1.3 million Facebook users within his group in just shy of a month, which is just unbelievable to see.
Yeah, that is crazy.
It's when you have a really great idea, it goes very well, but without planning and figuring out a strategic strategy on how you're going to go about doing something, it's already with 9 out of 10 businesses failing, you're just adding to your chance of failing. And that's how we fundamentally look at it, that anything you can do to really kind of scale a business or increase the chances of success, you should be doing, especially when the rates of success are already so low.
Yeah. Agreed. 100%. I mean, I agree. Like we joked, the overnight success that took 20 years, right? I mean, it's a grind, and maybe it's a month to get but there's a lot of execution that's going to have to happen to monetize, let's say, even those 1.3 million, or there's a lot that goes into building a successful business. As you said, 90% of startups fail. One of the things that I think you touched on, and I think it's interesting, and I'd love to just kind of clarify what I was saying and sort of see if you agree or disagree. You mentioned sort of the due diligence, if you will, right? Doing the homework, research on a stock, right? So if you're picking a stock, one of the things that we look at, and I think this is maybe the new model of, and especially, for the companies that are coming through, the issuers that will be issuing shares on our platform, we look at the new model of research being, and I quote my 4-year-old, "Daddy, why do you always do this? Daddy, what does this mean?" I'm like, I don't know. I don't know why I do it so often. But the new model of research, because information is so readily available to everyone, right? And because companies are becoming more and more, I won't say necessarily transparent in the sense that you can see their financials like you would on a publicly traded security, but you can now access the founders often in different, kind of contexts. You can see, who their clients are. You can get a feel for who they are on their social posts. Often social is a glorified sort of version of what they're doing, but it does give you a feel for what they're doing. As a customer, you can obviously use their product, experience their customer service, their, how they treat people, their staff, all these different things. So it's becoming very much, I think, a lot easier for the average person to make I won't say fully educated, but a much more educated decision on a company, whether it is a buy or sell, or you know what I mean, whether they should invest or not in an opportunity. And I think that is sort of the new world of versus the old world of, pouring over, an offering memorandum, or, some sort of, especially in the private equity space, or pouring over the financials of the past 3 years, and, having to go through the EBITDA. And, I use that term, half the people in the world don't even know what it means, but,
Of course.
it's the concept of like the traditional analyst and sort of the everyday investor have kind of the ability for them to both pick a winner potentially, or to both feel that they have enough information to make a educated decision. That divide, I think, is narrowing with the information that is available on the internet. Would you agree or disagree, or how do you think that plays into sort of the everyday investor?
Of course. So with the everyday investor, the challenge that I find is there's an upside to the internet. And I was watching a Netflix show. I can't pull the name exactly, but it's this new Netflix show saying how the internet's changed everything. But it's
the social experiment, or the one about the phones and we're all addicted,
exactly,
or whatever.
Yeah, of course, that one.
I watched it as well. Yeah,
it was very interesting, and it sort of showed me with so much information available, you can also get lost.
Well, that's the sort of the misinformation, right? The misinformation, yeah.
Right. You have all these small little news articles that are posting like very small little things about specific stocks, saying how they're good stocks to invest in or bad stocks to invest in. And with crypto, it's even worse. Like crypto is a horrid industry where you have small publishers, bloggers, everyone from every walk of life posting their opinion on what they think is going to happen next with crypto. And some are wrong, some are right. And the worst part is normally the trusted sources. Like your CNN, your Fox News are saying, oh, it's going down, and the next day it skyrockets back up because they don't know the industry that well.
Right.
And it's sort of same thing with stocks. And it's sort of what I've seen, especially in a time that's so uncertain, like right now with COVID, it's the market's falling and climbing and falling and climbing and falling and climbing. And it's very, very interesting to see. At the initial part of COVID, it was a scary market to say the least.
Oh, the sky was falling for sure.
Yeah. Basically, it's everyone was said, okay, we're on the brink of the next big recession, and it's all perspective at this point. But it's how I realistically see it is with any stock, it depends, first of all, like you said, how much are you investing in the stock, right? If you're investing $10, $100, $1,000, okay, that's one thing. But if you're investing your life savings, that's an entirely different conversation. Or if you're an accredited investor, that's a different conversation as well, right? It's not many people are accredited investors, and it's to have the experience of doing that myself and being able to invest in the stocks that I have and the portfolios I have. It's very interesting to see how some stocks, even though in COVID, are still doing well and still pulling through and still succeeding. Something like Zoom has become the de facto,
the de facto. It's like a verb. Let's get on a Zoom. It's like literally. It's like I'm gonna Zoom.
It's become Google.
Google. Exactly. Right.
It's almost like in the same sense how Ford invented the word automobile or car, right? It's become a normal word. Before then, it didn't really mean much, right?
We just did full circle. We just went full circle to what we talked about at the beginning, right? Creating a word from a word that didn't exist, right? So
exactly, and that's what really innovative companies are all about, right? It's companies that really are trying to create change, create up words, and that's sort of connecting back to what I said initially. But it's when it sort of touching more on your point with stocks.
What did you call it? A create up word? Create up words?
No, a made up word.
I thought you said create up words. Yeah, made up words. Yeah, for sure.
But it's I guess create up word is definitely a unique word, but
that should be your next business. Create up. I wonder. Whoever could get to the domain first. Anyways, yeah, that's
right?
cool.
So it's how I see it is it's regardless the amount you should invest personally. Being in the position I have with investments, even if it's $10, $100, doesn't matter to me. It's even with any stock I make an investment in, just to kind of give you a feeling. I use an app called Investor. It's not, once again, another made up word, but it's Investor is a platform where you can do virtual trading, and it's a platform I use quite a bit. And before I even buy a stock, I watch it for about 2 months, invest with fake money. After I've reached a certain benchmark of what I consider a success, I then actually start investing in the stock, because now I have a grounds to work off of. And that's sort of what I do. Even if I'm investing $1,000 into stock, it's not about the money, it's about the principle for me.
Right.
I like to be a winner. I don't like to be a loser. Everyone says the same kind of thing, but it's whatever I can do. It's called analyzing risk and reducing it as much as possible. And that's sort of how I am as a person.
Definitely. Cool. Well, Josh, I really appreciate you joining me here today. We should definitely continue the conversation off here. I think what you're doing with Convertx is interesting. I have one last question that I ask. It's become a choose your own adventure. Kind of two parts. You choose which direction you want to go in. The first question that you can choose is, if there was one word that you could go back and basically sort of one piece of advice you could give to a younger you or somebody that's kind of starting out, what would that one word be? So that's option A. Option B is, you're standing on a cliff, you're about to fall off. It's your final words to the world. What do you want them to be?
I'm going to take the first one, and it's interesting because it sort of touches the second one, and I would say jump.
But then if you jump, what are you telling the rest of the world?
No, I'm saying with the first
I get what you're saying, jump,
course.
like jump in, get started, kind of you're implying that side. But if it was applied to the second one, you just jumped. But now what are you saying to the rest of the world? Anyways, don't worry about it. I get it. Cool.
At least you took the risk. It's better to take the risk and fail rather than not take the risk and have regret.
I 100% agree. Well, Josh, I really appreciate you joining me. Thank you very much. Everyone else, this is One Take, powered by Backers. I will see you again tomorrow. Thanks, Josh.
Awesome.
Appreciate it. Cheers.
Appreciate it. Cheers.
OMG, baby, tell them.